Your performance metrics suggest stagnation, Graham announced during my quarterly review. On the screen behind him, 9 years of work shrank into red bars. I fail to identify achievements that justify your continued position. My hands clenched under the table. 105 projects. Every critical workflow in the building bore my fingerprints, so seamless no one remembered they'd been built at all. Graham had been COO for 32 days. Perhaps it's time to explore opportunities elsewhere, he said, cufflinks gleaming. Natalie shot me an apologetic look. Ethan, our CEO, stared at his phone. Your productivity lags behind junior hires, Graham went on. Your work lacks innovation, creativity. Each word stung. I'd spent nights perfecting those systems while Ethan sold their reliability as the company's backbone. We need visionaries, he said, nodding to 2 new hires. I scanned the room. Faces that had called me at 2 a.m. during outages, who'd toasted my promotions and mourned with me when my father died. Now they avoided my eyes. I stood. You'll recognize my contributions soon enough. Ethan finally looked up. Graham smirked. Clear your desk by evening. IT watched as I packed 9 years into a shipping box. Miranda from HR whispered, this feels wrong. Everyone knows what you built. Apparently not everyone, I said, signing the papers with a steady hand. Colleagues hovered nervously. Who'll maintain the client portal? Jeremy asked. The compliance system? Diane added. No one else understands it. Management will have to figure that out, I replied. Ethan watched from his glass office. No goodbye, no handoff. Just 9 years of institutional memory walking out the door. I held it together until the elevator doors closed. Then I crumpled. My name is Ivy Chapman. Until 4 hours ago I was Senior Integration Architect at Crestwood Solutions, the invisible force that turned a scrappy startup into an industry leader. I built middleware that bridged legacy systems, international frameworks that crossed borders and regulations, and scaling architectures that held everything together. No applause. No raises. Just reliability. Graham didn't understand that. He saw no revenue in my work, only costs. So he cut me. At first, freedom felt strange. Quiet mornings. Real sunrises. Then the messages started. Portals crashing. Compliance systems broken. No one can fix your code. Not because I'd hidden anything, but because real understanding lives in the builder's mind. When Crestwood missed targets and its stock plummeted, Ethan finally called. Graham's gone, he admitted. We need you back. He offered 30% more. A minor title bump. Insufficient, I said. Ivy, be reasonable. I was reasonable for 9 years. I'm done. I named my terms. Triple salary, executive authority, and public acknowledgement of everything I'd built. That's considerable, he responded, discomfort evident. Actually, it's entirely fair, I replied. You're not compensating future work. You're paying for what I've already created that nobody else fully comprehends. The board will never. Then find someone else to repair your systems, I interrupted. Though I suspect you've already tried. Another extended pause. I could practically hear him calculating the cost of continued failures against meeting my demands. I have an interview with Horizon Technologies tomorrow, I added, mentioning their biggest competitor. Their offer is quite generous. Don't make any decisions until Friday, he said quickly. I need to convene the board. I disconnected and stared at my reflection in the darkened window. The woman looking back seemed transformed. Shoulders straighter. Eyes clearer. For weeks ago I would have accepted that initial offer with gratitude. Now I understood my actual worth. The interview with Horizon Technologies exceeded expectations. Their chief technology officer actually understood my contributions to Crestwood's infrastructure. He'd been attempting to replicate several of them for years. They extended a director position immediately with a comprehensive package that nearly matched my demands to Ethan. We need an answer by Monday, the Horizon CEO said, shaking my hand firmly. Wednesday passed without word from Crestwood. Thursday morning arrived with silence. By afternoon I began mentally preparing for life at Horizon Technologies. Then at 5:42 in the evening Ethan called. We accept your terms, he said without preamble. All of them. I felt a curious mixture of vindication and unexpected melancholy. Send the paperwork. There's one additional request, he added. The board wants you to start immediately. Tomorrow if possible. Monday, I countered. I need time to prepare. Things are urgent, Ivy. They became urgent the moment Graham decided I was dispensable, I replied. Monday is quite soon enough. The employment contract arrived within 90 minutes. Triple my previous salary. Chief Operating Officer of Technical Operations. A seat on the executive leadership team. Public acknowledgement of my contributions. Everything documented in writing, signed by Ethan and the board chairman. I signed and returned it. Then poured wine in celebration. Not of returning to Crestwood, but of finally being valued appropriately. The announcement circulated Monday morning. My return described as a critical leadership acquisition with detailed acknowledgement of my essential historical contributions to Crestwood's core infrastructure. Every person who'd witnessed my dismissal received this message alongside news of my executive compensation and reporting structure. Walking into the building felt surreal. The same security guard greeted me, but instead of my old badge he handed me an executive access card. The same elevator carried me upward, but I exited on the executive floor rather than the technical department. The same people nodded as I passed, but their expressions carried new respect. Or was it wariness? Miranda from HR met me at the door to my new office. An actual corner office with windows, not the cubicle I'd occupied for years. Welcome back, she said, her smile genuine. Your team is assembled in conference room C whenever you're ready. Pi team. Yes, the Technical Operations Division. 27 people total, including the new hires Ethan approved this weekend. He handed me a folder. Their profiles are all here. You have complete authority to reorganize as you see fit. The reality of my new position began crystallizing. This wasn't just about repairing what had broken during my absence. This was actual leadership authority. In conference room C, anxious faces greeted me. Some familiar colleagues, some new hires, all waiting to see who exactly I'd become after my public dismissal and triumphant return. Good morning, I began, surveying the room. Most of you know me. Some don't. For 9 years, I built and maintained the systems forming the backbone of this company. Now we're going to rebuild what's been broken and create something stronger. Jeremy raised his hand tentatively. Is it true the Phoenix implementation failed completely after you left? The Phoenix implementation, our largest client project, had been my final major architecture before Graham arrived. It didn't fail, I corrected. It was failed by poor leadership decisions that removed its principal architect without transition planning. I opened my tablet and projected the current system status. Now let's see what we're working with. The first week passed in intensive diagnostics and repairs. Critical systems had degraded without proper maintenance. Hasty fixes had created cascading problems. Half-implemented changes initiated under Graham had corrupted core functions. By Friday we'd stabilized the most urgent issues. I worked alongside my team, hands-on with the code, demonstrating rather than directing. When we resolved the issues plaguing the Phoenix implementation at 11:30 Friday night, spontaneous applause erupted in the development room. First round on me, I announced, and we relocated to a nearby establishment to celebrate. Diane clinked glasses with me as others chatted excitedly about plans to rebuild the international portal. You know what's strange, she said quietly. Ethan hasn't interfered once. Not a single executive directive or modification request. That was in my contract, I replied. Complete technical autonomy. Smart, she nodded. But that's not all of it. He seems different since you returned. Watchful, almost nervous. I considered this. Executives don't appreciate being proven wrong publicly. Maybe. He studied me. What are you really after, Ivy? Revenge for how they treated you. The question caught me off guard with its directness. What did I want? The validation of return. The satisfaction of proving my worth. Something deeper. I want what I've always wanted, I finally answered. To build something that works properly. But as I said it, I recognized the incomplete truth. There was something else brewing beneath my calm exterior. A plan forming that I hadn't fully acknowledged, even to myself. The second week brought my first executive leadership meeting. I sat at the gleaming conference table, now peer to those who'd previously barely acknowledged my existence. Ethan presided with his usual charisma, but I noticed how his gaze frequently darted to me throughout presentations. The chief financial officer presented quarterly projections showing recovery after recent troubles. The VP of sales detailed renewed client confidence. The chief marketing officer outlined aggressive plans to regain market share lost during the system failures. And now, Ethan said, I'd like our new CEO of technical operations to share her assessment and plans. All eyes turned to me. Some curious, some wary, some openly skeptical. The weight of expectation hung in the air. I opened my presentation slowly, methodically, not with technical diagrams or recovery metrics, but with a 9-year timeline of Crestwood's growth. Each major client acquisition. Each significant feature launch. Each technological breakthrough. Beside each milestone, I displayed the underlying technical architecture that had made it possible. Systems I had designed and implemented largely without credit. Our recent failures weren't accidents, I explained calmly. They were inevitable results of removing the person who understood how these interconnected systems function as a whole. Several executives shifted uncomfortably. Ethan's expression remained carefully neutral. Moving forward, I continued, we have 2 choices. We can patch existing systems, a temporary solution requiring constant maintenance, or we can rebuild properly with appropriate resources and recognition for the architects. What's your recommendation? Asked the CFO. Rebuilding is the only sustainable path, I replied. But it requires something Crestwood has historically lacked: transparency about who creates value and appropriate compensation for their contributions. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Are you proposing structural changes beyond your department? Ethan asked carefully. I'm proposing a culture change, I answered, meeting his gaze directly. One that prevents us from ever again discarding someone whose value we've failed to recognize. The tension in the room was palpable. I'd pushed boundaries, made implicit criticisms explicit. But something told me this was merely the opening move in a larger game, one where I finally held cards worth playing. As we adjourned, Ethan asked me to remain behind. The door closed, leaving us alone in the expansive conference room. That was quite a presentation, he said, his tone unreadable. Just establishing context, I replied. He studied me for an extended moment. What's your actual plan here, Ivy? Beyond the contract terms and system repairs. I met his gaze steadily. You'll understand that soon enough. His expression flickered with something between concern and curiosity. I'm beginning to think bringing you back might have unexpected consequences. Most valuable things do, I replied simply, gathering my materials. See you tomorrow, Ethan. As I walked to my office, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. We need to talk about what really happened with Graham. Not everyone at Crestwood is who they appear to be. Meet me at Riverside Park, 7 p.m. tonight. Come alone. I stared at the cryptic message, my fingers hovering over the screen. Anonymous messages inviting people to secluded locations rarely ended well in movies. Then again, Riverside Park was hardly secluded. It was a popular evening spot filled with joggers and families until well after dark. Curiosity won. If someone had information about Graham that they couldn't share inside Crestwood's walls, I needed to hear it. The spring evening was pleasant, cherry blossoms scattering across the walking path as I approached the designated meeting spot. I'd chosen casual clothes, jeans and a light jacket, wanting to appear approachable rather than in executive mode. A woman sat alone on a bench overlooking the water, her profile vaguely familiar though I couldn't immediately place her. As I approached, she turned and recognition clicked into place. Sophie. Ethan's executive assistant for the past 4 years. Thank you for coming, she said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. I wasn't certain you would. Your message was intriguing, I replied, taking a seat beside her. What's this about Graham? She pulled a small tablet from her bag, fingers trembling slightly as she unlocked it. Graham didn't choose you for dismissal at random. And he wasn't just incompetent. He was deliberately sabotaging specific projects. Why would he do that? I asked, skepticism edging my voice. Because he never actually worked for Crestwood, she handed me the tablet. At least not exclusively. The screen displayed a private email thread between Graham and an external address. I scrolled through, my blood pressure rising with each message. Detailed reports on Crestwood's proprietary systems. Assessments of vulnerable points in our architecture. Lists of key personnel to neutralize, with my name at the top. He was working for Horizon Technologies, I whispered, the realization crashing over me. Corporate espionage, Sophie nodded gravely. Not just gathering intelligence. Active sabotage. He was brought in to weaken Crestwood from within. Target key systems. Remove essential personnel. Create openings for Horizon to exploit in the market. And Ethan hired him without proper vetting? She hesitated, glancing around again before leaning closer. That's where it gets complicated. The board insisted on Graham's appointment. Overrode Ethan's concerns. The board. My mind raced through implications. Why would they? 3 board members have investments in Horizon Technologies through shell companies, she interrupted. I discovered it accidentally while preparing materials for last quarter's board meeting. Keep scrolling. I swiped through more documents. Financial records showing the connections. Calendar invites for private meetings between Graham and 2 board members. Strategy notes outlining a controlled decline of Crestwood's market position. Why are you showing me this? I asked, suddenly wary. Why not take it to Ethan? Her expression darkened. Because I don't know who to trust anymore. Ethan's been acting strangely since before Graham arrived. Closed-door meetings. Encrypted communications. He claims he opposed Graham's hiring, but I've seen messages suggesting otherwise. The ground seemed to shift beneath me. If this information was accurate, Crestwood wasn't just suffering from poor management decisions. It was being deliberately undermined from within. What do you want from me? I asked. You're the only executive without connections to either faction, she said. Your systems keep this company running, and you have personal stake in exposing whoever orchestrated your dismissal. She met my gaze directly. I need an ally I can trust. I considered her words carefully. Trust was in short supply these days, and she was asking for mine with only digital evidence that could potentially be fabricated. I'll look into this, I said finally. But I need time to verify independently. She nodded, seemingly relieved. That's all I ask. Be careful who you confide in. As I walked home, my mind churned with possibilities. If Sophie's information was accurate, my return to Crestwood had placed me in the center of a corporate war I hadn't known was being fought. My dismissal hadn't been about my performance. It had been strategic elimination of an obstacle. But who was really pulling the strings? Rogue board members? Ethan himself? External forces I hadn't identified? The next day I began subtle investigations. Nothing that would trigger alarms, just careful probing of system logs and access patterns. Who had been reviewing which portions of our architecture? Which projects had received unusual scrutiny during Graham's brief tenure? What I found confirmed portions of Sophie's claims. Graham had indeed focused attention on our most innovative systems, the ones that gave us competitive advantage. He had systematically removed or reassigned personnel who understood these systems best, starting with me. But something still didn't add up. If Graham had been working for Horizon, why had they offered me a position so quickly after my departure from Crestwood? Was I being recruited as an unwitting accomplice? Or was someone at Horizon running a separate operation? I needed more information before confronting anyone. Accusations of corporate sabotage without ironclad evidence would only undermine my newly established position. Or worse, mark me as the next target. Over the next week, I rebuilt trust with my technical team while quietly gathering intelligence. I revamped security protocols under the guise of system improvements. I implemented subtle tracking measures in key systems to monitor unusual access patterns. I cultivated relationships with assistants and support staff who might have observed unusual behaviors. Meanwhile, I played my executive role perfectly, attending meetings, delivering progress reports, participating in strategic discussions. If anyone suspected my parallel investigation, they gave no indication. Then came the breakthrough. Late one evening, as I worked alone in my office, my monitoring system pinged softly. Someone was accessing our client database using Ethan's credentials at 11:47 when Ethan was supposedly at a charity gala across town. I'd seen the social media posts of his arrival less than an hour ago. I traced the access point, a private terminal in our secure development area where few had authorization after hours. I pulled up the security camera feed and froze. There sat Leonard, chairman of the board, methodically reviewing our most sensitive client information. He wasn't just browsing. He was systematically downloading contact details for our highest value clients. I captured the footage and data trail, then quietly logged the activity on my secure private server. One piece of the puzzle, but a significant one. The next morning, Ethan called an emergency executive meeting. His expression was grim as we assembled. "We have a situation," he announced once the door closed. 3 of our top clients received solicitations from Horizon yesterday, offering migration services with insider knowledge of their specific configurations on our platform. Murmurs of concern filled the room. "This isn't a coincidence," Ethan continued. "Someone with intimate knowledge of our client implementations is feeding information to our competitor." His gaze swept the room, lingering momentarily on each executive. When it reached me, I maintained perfect composure despite my racing thoughts. "I've authorized a comprehensive security audit," he declared. "Beginning immediately. All system access will be logged and reviewed. All external communications monitored." My pulse quickened. A security audit would inevitably uncover my own covert monitoring systems. I needed to act quickly. "I have information that may be relevant," I said, drawing all eyes to me. "But I would prefer to discuss it privately first." Ethan's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. We'll meet after this session." The meeting continued with discussion of damage control measures, but tension hung in the air. I'd made a calculated risk, revealing that I had information without specifying what it was. Now I needed to navigate the fallout carefully. When the room cleared, Ethan closed the door and turned to me. "What information, Ivy?" I measured my words carefully. "I've observed unusual access patterns in our systems. Not from external threats, but from within Crestwood." His expression remained neutral. "Go on." "Someone used your credentials last night to access client data, while you were verifiably elsewhere." A flicker of genuine surprise crossed his features. "That's impossible. My authentication requires biometric confirmation." Nevertheless, it happened. I pulled up the sanitized logs, enough to demonstrate the breach without revealing my monitoring system. "I haven't identified who yet, but they're using executive credentials to extract sensitive information." "Why didn't you bring this to security immediately?" His tone carried accusation. "Because I don't know how far this compromise extends," I replied evenly. "After what happened with Graham, I've been cautious about who to trust." Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps even respect. "You think this connects to Graham's actions?" "I think Graham's brief tenure here was part of a larger strategy. Dismissing me wasn't random. It was calculated to remove someone who might detect system vulnerabilities being exploited." Ethan studied me intently. "You've been investigating this since your return." It wasn't a question. I nodded. "Without authorization. Without informing leadership. Without interference," I corrected. "My contract grants me technical autonomy." A tense silence stretched between us before he spoke again. "What else have you discovered?" I considered my options carefully. Revealing everything would leave me vulnerable if Ethan himself was involved. Revealing nothing would waste a potential alliance if he wasn't. "Enough to know the breach extends to board level," I finally said. "But not enough to identify everyone involved." His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed with calculation. "How do I know you're not part of this? Your dismissal and triumphant return could have been staged. Your interview with Horizon suspiciously convenient." "You don't," I acknowledged. "Just as I don't know if your apparent surprise is genuine or performance." We'd reached an impasse. 2 executives with reason to suspect each other, neither willing to reveal their full hand. "What do you propose?" he finally asked. "A controlled test," I replied. "Feed different information through different channels. See which pieces reach Horizon." "That would require involving others in our suspicions." "Not necessarily. You and I could manage the entire operation." He considered this, fingers drumming lightly on the table. "If you're right about board involvement, this is extremely dangerous territory, Ivy." "I'm aware. And if you're wrong, or if you're misleading me, it's career suicide." "Also aware." Our eyes locked in silent assessment. Finally he nodded once. "Set it up." But this stays exclusively between us until we have conclusive evidence. As I left his office, uncertainty churned within me. Had I just formed an alliance with a trustworthy CEO or handed ammunition to the orchestrator of a corporate conspiracy? Either way, I'd committed to a path that would irrevocably alter Crestwood and my future within it. That evening, a text arrived from Sophie. Leonard accessed E's computer yesterday. Be careful. Things are accelerating. I stared at my reflection in the darkened window of my apartment. The woman looking back was caught in a web of corporate intrigue far beyond what I'd imagined when I'd stated those defiant words. You'll recognize my contributions soon enough. Little did I know then just how that recognition would manifest. The next morning I implemented my plan. Working with Ethan cautiously, I created 3 distinct bait projects in our development system. Each contained seemingly valuable but actually harmless proprietary information. Each was accessible through different channels and visible to different segments of leadership. Project Cardinal could only be viewed through Ethan's access path. Project Sapphire was visible to the technical executive team. Project Horizon was accessible to board members only. I embedded unique traceable markers in each project's data structure. Digital fingerprints that would reveal themselves if the information appeared elsewhere. Then I waited. Meanwhile, I continued strengthening our actual systems. My team worked tirelessly to rebuild what had been damaged during my absence. Morale improved as they saw genuine progress. The company began stabilizing. Client confidence returned. Metrics improved. 2 weeks passed. I maintained vigilant monitoring while presenting a perfect facade of executive integration. Ethan and I had daily check-ins regarding our trap projects, careful to disguise them as routine development reviews. Then on a Tuesday morning my alert system triggered. Project Horizon, the board-level bait, had been accessed at 3:32 in the morning from Leonard's private terminal. By noon, elements of its proprietary algorithm had appeared in a confidential pitch Horizon was preparing for one of our wavering clients. I summoned Ethan to my office. Reversal of our usual meeting pattern. A power move I made deliberately. We have confirmation, I said without preamble, showing him the evidence. Leonard is feeding information to Horizon. The question is whether he's acting alone. Ethan studied the data, expression hardening. This is definitive. But confronting a chairman without board support is suicide. Which is why we don't confront him yet. I pulled up our company's articles of incorporation on my screen. We build an airtight case first. That could take weeks. Meanwhile, he continues undermining us. Not if we accelerate our timeline. I outlined my next steps. A more aggressive strategy than our careful approach thus far. We feed him exactly what we want Horizon to see. Ethan's eyes widened with understanding. Disinformation. Precisely. I smiled thinly. Let's see how Horizon responds to implementing some spectacular failures. Over the next week we executed our plan meticulously. Project Horizon received updates containing fatally flawed algorithms. Innovations that would appear breakthrough initially but catastrophically fail under real-world conditions. Leonard took the bait, accessing the information during early morning hours when he thought no one was monitoring. Meanwhile, I expanded my investigation. If Leonard was compromised, who else might be? I traced communication patterns, financial transactions, meeting schedules, building a comprehensive map of potential conspirators. The results shocked even my cynical expectations. 3 board members including Leonard, the recently departed Graham, and 2 current executives showed clear connections to Horizon through various channels. They'd been systematically weakening Crestwood from within, positioning Horizon to absorb our failing company at a fraction of its value. But the most surprising discovery came buried in encrypted communications on our backup servers. Ethan himself had known about the infiltration far longer than he'd admitted to me. He hadn't initiated it, but he'd recognized it months ago and chosen strategic inaction. But the answer came in further communications. Ethan was playing a longer game. Rather than exposing the conspiracy immediately, he'd been gathering evidence while appearing oblivious. His plan had been progressing methodically until Graham, overeager and unaware of Ethan's knowledge, had accelerated matters by dismissing me. My return had forced Ethan's timeline forward. He'd needed me to fix the systems Graham had damaged, but he hadn't anticipated my own investigation running parallel to his. Now we were both aware of each other's knowledge, circling warily like chess players who'd recognized an unexpected master across the board. I called Sophie. We need to talk. Not in the park this time. We met at a small cafe far from Crestwood's offices. Her nervousness had increased visibly since our last meeting. Ethan knows, she said immediately. He asked me about our communication yesterday. What did you tell him? That I've been keeping you informed of unusual activities as any good assistant would do for a senior executive. She fidgeted with her napkin. He seemed to accept it, but he's watching me more closely now. Continue exactly as before, I instructed. Don't change any patterns. If Ethan truly suspects you, altered behavior will only confirm it. And you? She asked. What's your next move? I considered how much to reveal. Sophie had proven reliable thus far, but complete transparency remained risky. I'm gathering final evidence, I said carefully. When it's complete, we'll act decisively. Against Leonard? Against everyone involved in undermining this company, I replied, including those who knew and chose inaction. Her eyes widened slightly. Be careful, Ivy. These people destroy careers and worse, when threatened. I smiled grimly. They already tried destroying mine. That didn't work out as planned. The quarterly board meeting arrived, the perfect stage for the final act of this corporate drama. 2 days before, I sent Ethan a comprehensive briefing detailing everything I'd discovered, including his own early awareness of the conspiracy. My message was simple. We could proceed together or as adversaries, but proceedings were now inevitable. His response came 8 hours later. Together. My office, 6:30 a.m. tomorrow. We met in the pale light of early morning, the executive floor still empty except for security. You've been thorough, Ethan said, gesturing to my report on his desk. More than I expected. That seems to be a recurring theme with me, I replied evenly. He acknowledged this with a slight nod. What do you want, Ivy? Truly want, beyond exposing this conspiracy? The question caught me off guard with its directness. What did I want? Vindication? Advancement? Justice? I want what I said in that meeting when Graham dismissed me, I answered finally. For everyone to recognize my contributions. Not just as a technical architect but as someone who builds systems that last, including business systems with proper accountability. And if achieving that means significant changes to Crestwood's leadership structure, then those changes are overdue. He studied me for an extended moment, then nodded decisively. I agree. Here's what I propose. The board meeting began at 10 o'clock sharp. 16 members seated around the gleaming table. Leonard at its head. Ethan to his right. I sat halfway down, seemingly just another executive presenting quarterly technical updates. Leonard called the meeting to order with practiced authority, proceeding through standard agenda items with efficient precision. Financial reports, market positioning, competitive analysis. Then Ethan requested the floor for an unscheduled presentation. Before we continue, he said, standing, I believe we have a matter of corporate governance to address. Leonard's expression flickered with momentary concern before settling into polite interest. The agenda is quite full, Ethan. Perhaps this could wait for committee review. I'm afraid not, Ethan replied, nodding to me. This directly impacts Crestwood's immediate future. I connected my tablet to the display system. The room darkened as the presentation screen illuminated with a single stark image. Leonard accessing Project Horizon at 3:32 in the morning. What is this? Leonard demanded, voice sharp. Evidence, I replied calmly. Of systematic corporate espionage and sabotage orchestrated from within this room. Chaos erupted. Leonard attempting to adjourn the meeting. Other implicated board members rising in protest. The remaining directors demanding explanations. Through it all, Ethan and I stood calmly at the center of the storm we'd unleashed. When order finally restored, I methodically presented our findings. Access logs. Communication records. Financial connections. The deliberate weakening of Crestwood's position to benefit Horizon Technologies. The strategic elimination of personnel, including myself, who might have detected the scheme earlier. This is absurd, Leonard sputtered. Fabricated evidence from a disgruntled employee you never should have rehired. Actually, I smiled thinly. That dismissal was your conspirator's most significant miscalculation. I switched slides to display Graham's original assessment of me, the confidential report that had preceded my public humiliation. Subject demonstrates dangerous potential to identify system vulnerabilities. Maintains comprehensive understanding of interconnected architectures. Recommend immediate removal before detection becomes possible. The room fell silent as implications sank in. My dismissal wasn't about performance, I continued. It was about eliminating the person most likely to discover your scheme. But instead of disappearing quietly, I came back with executive access and a mandate to investigate exactly the systems you were exploiting. Leonard's face had gone ashen. This meeting is adjourned. We'll reconvene after legal review of these allegations. Actually, Ethan interjected smoothly, we've already consulted legal counsel. And the SEC. And federal prosecutors specializing in corporate espionage. The trap closed. External investigators entered the boardroom, accompanied by corporate counsel. 3 board members, including Leonard, were escorted out for immediate questioning. The remaining directors sat in stunned silence as Ethan outlined the transition plan we'd developed. Effective immediately, Leonard and the implicated directors are suspended pending investigation. I will continue as CEO with expanded oversight from non-compromised board members. And Ivy Chapman will assume the position of Chief Operating Officer with particular focus on restructuring our governance systems to prevent future vulnerabilities. Murmurs of shock rippled through the room. It wasn't just technical systems I would be rebuilding. It was the entire operational structure of Crestwood itself. As the meeting concluded in subdued discussion of next steps, Ethan approached me privately. Spectacular execution, he said quietly. Though I notice you omitted my early awareness from your presentation. Strategic decision, I replied. The company needs stability during transition. 2 adversaries can become allies when facing a greater threat. And now that the threat is neutralized. Now we rebuild something better, he finished. Together. If your intentions align with mine. He extended his hand. To new beginnings, CEO Chapman. 3 months later, Crestwood had transformed. With Leonard and his co-conspirators facing federal charges, we'd restructured both our technical systems and corporate governance. Transparency initiatives. Equitable recognition programs. Advancement based on measurable contribution rather than politics. The Phoenix Project had relaunched successfully. Client confidence had fully restored. Our stock had rebounded beyond pre-crisis levels. In my new corner office, I sometimes reflected on the journey from undervalued technical specialist to company leadership. My revenge hadn't been destruction. It hadn't even been the public vindication of my return. It had been something far more satisfying. Rebuilding the company according to principles of fairness and recognition. One afternoon, Sophie stopped by my office with coffee. You know what I've been thinking about? She said, settling into the chair across from my desk. That performance review where Graham dismissed you. Those words you said. You'll recognize my contributions soon enough, I quoted from memory. Exactly. At the time I thought you were just being defiant. But you were actually telling the truth, weren't you? You knew what would happen when you left. I considered this. I knew their systems would fail without me. What I didn't know was discovering the conspiracy. That was unexpected. But you turned it to your advantage, she observed. Use the crisis as leverage to gain real power, not just your old position back. I used the crisis to gain appropriate recognition, I corrected gently. There's a difference. Power for its own sake is empty. But authority to create lasting change, that's something worth fighting for. She smiled. You sound like a CEO. Maybe someday, I replied. But right now I'm exactly where I need to be. That evening I received an email from an unexpected source. The subject line read, "Congratulations and apologies." It was from Jeremy, one of the junior analysts Graham had held up as an example of modern thinking during my dismissal. Ms. Chapman, I wanted to reach out personally to apologize for my silence during that performance review. I was new, intimidated, and didn't understand what was really happening. Watching you these past months has taught me more about leadership and integrity than any business course ever could. You didn't just come back and fix systems. You changed how this entire company operates. You made it possible for people like me to be recognized fairly for our contributions. And you did it without becoming vindictive or cruel, even though you had every right to be. Thank you for showing us a better way. Jeremy. I read the message twice, feeling unexpected emotion tighten my throat. This was the real victory, not defeating conspirators or gaining executive titles, but creating an environment where everyone's contributions could be recognized. I drafted a response. Jeremy, thank you for your kind words. You were in an impossible position during that meeting, and I never held your silence against you. The system failed us both, you by creating a culture where speaking up felt dangerous, and me by not valuing the work I'd done. We've all learned from what happened. The important thing now is ensuring it never happens again, not just at Crestwood but anywhere we go in our careers. Keep up the excellent work. Your recent analysis on the infrastructure expansion was impressive. Ivy. As I hit send, my office door opened. Ethan stood there holding a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. Celebrating something? I asked. We just closed the Riverside Technologies acquisition, he said, entering and pouring. The deal I've been working on for 6 months. The one that nearly fell apart during our crisis. He handed me a glass. We wouldn't have recovered in time without you. The board knows it. I know it. And now the entire industry knows it. We clinked glasses. There's something else, he continued. The board met this afternoon. They want to formalize succession planning. Given recent events, they're concerned about leadership continuity. Makes sense, I said neutrally, unsure where this was heading. They've asked me to identify a potential successor. Someone who understands both the technical and business sides of Crestwood. Someone who's proven they can handle corporate adversity. He met my eyes directly. I recommended you. I set down my glass carefully. Ethan, I just became CEO 3 months ago. And in those 3 months, you've transformed our operations, exposed a conspiracy that would have destroyed us, and earned respect across every department. He smiled. I'm not planning to retire tomorrow. But when that day comes, whether it's 2 years or 10, the board and I agree you're the right choice. What if I don't want to be CEO? I asked honestly. What if I prefer building systems to managing politics? Then you build whatever systems you want, he replied. But you do it with the authority to protect them. To ensure they're valued properly. To make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else here. I considered his words, watching the city lights begin to twinkle through my office window as evening settled over downtown. I'll think about it, I said finally. That's all I ask. He raised his glass again. To the future, whatever it holds. To the future, I echoed. 6 months after my return, Crestwood Solutions held its annual company celebration. Unlike previous years' stiff corporate affairs, this one felt different. More genuine. More inclusive. I stood at the podium as newly appointed Chief Operating Officer, preparing to present the annual Innovation Awards, a program I'd created to recognize contributions that often went unnoticed. Excellence in business isn't just about what's visible, I began, addressing the assembled employees. It's not only the presentations to clients or the features that generate headlines. True excellence is in the infrastructure. The systems that work so well you forget they're there. The people who solve problems before they become crises. The quiet dedication that keeps everything running. I announced the awards, watching as colleagues from various departments came forward. The database administrator who'd prevented a major security breach. The quality assurance specialist whose attention to detail had caught a critical bug. The operations coordinator who'd streamlined processes company-wide. Each recipient received not just recognition, but substantial bonuses and advancement opportunities. As the event concluded and people mingled, Diane approached with a knowing smile. You've completely redesigned how this company works, she said. Not just the technical systems, everything. The culture. The values. The way people are recognized and promoted. I just made visible what was always there, I replied. The contributions people were making whether anyone acknowledged them or not. Don't be modest, she countered. You fought for this. You could have just fixed the systems and collected your paycheck. Instead, you rebuilt everything from the ground up. She paused, then added more quietly, how does it feel? Getting everything you wanted. I considered the question. Did I have everything I wanted? The recognition, yes. The authority, yes. The The satisfaction of creating lasting change, absolutely. But something still felt incomplete. I wanted people to understand my value, I said slowly. And they do now. But I think I've realized something else. It was never really about me. It was about creating a place where everyone's value is understood. Where the people who do essential work, the invisible work, are finally seen. Diane squeezed my arm. That's why you're the right person for this role. You remember what it felt like to be overlooked. Late that night, back in my apartment, I pulled out the cardboard box from 9 months ago. The one I'd packed when Graham dismissed me. I'd kept it unopened in my closet, unsure why. Inside were the accumulated remnants of 9 years. Birthday cards from colleagues. Photographs from team celebrations. A mug someone had given me that said, "World's Best Problem Solver." Small tokens that had seemed pitiful when I'd packed them but now felt precious. At the bottom of the box I found something I'd forgotten. A handwritten note from Ethan from my second week at Crestwood, when we were still a struggling startup working out of a cramped office space. Ivy. Just wanted to say thanks for staying late to fix that integration issue. I know it wasn't glamorous work, but it saved our demo tomorrow. You're going to be essential to this company's success. E. I held the yellowed note, remembering that younger version of myself. The one who stayed late not for recognition but because leaving something broken contradicted my nature. The one who believed good work would eventually be noticed and valued. That person hadn't been naive. She'd been right. It had just taken longer than expected, and required fighting for it rather than waiting patiently. I placed the note on my refrigerator, anchored by a magnet. A reminder of where I'd started and how far I'd come. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Another late-night message. Some things never changed. But this one made me smile. It was from the technical team, sent to the entire company. Subject: thank you. To everyone at Crestwood. We wanted to take a moment to acknowledge someone who transformed not just our systems, but our entire approach to work. Ivy Chapman spent 9 years building the invisible infrastructure that made everything possible. When she was wrongly dismissed, we learned just how essential her contributions were. Since her return as COO, she's created an environment where everyone's work, visible or invisible, is recognized and valued. She's proven that the best leaders are those who remember what it's like to be overlooked. Thank you, Ivy, for showing us a better way. The technical operations team. I read the message 3 times, emotion threatening to overwhelm my professional composure. This was the recognition I'd wanted. Not just acknowledgement of my technical skills, but understanding of what I'd built and why it mattered. I drafted a response. Thank you all. But remember, every person in this company contributes something essential. My job now is making sure we never forget that again. Before we close this chapter of Ivy's story, thank you for staying until the end. If you found value in this journey from overlooked employee to transformative leader, please hit that like button and subscribe for more workplace justice stories. Have you ever seen someone's contributions finally recognized after being dismissed? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if you'd like to hear more stories about workplace transformation, let me know what situations interest you most. 1 year after my return, I sat in a different conference room. Same building. Same company. But everything had changed. The annual board meeting was underway, and this time I sat not as a dismissed employee or even as a returning specialist, but as Chief Operating Officer presenting our transformation results. Revenue up 37%, I reported. Client retention at 94%, highest in company history. Employee satisfaction scores increased by 42 points. And we've implemented systematic recognition programs that have reduced turnover by 60%. The new board chairman, appointed after Leonard's criminal conviction, nodded approvingly. Impressive results, Ms. Chapman. Your leadership has exceeded all expectations. After the meeting, as board members departed, Ethan and I remained. You know what's interesting? He said. A year ago, this company nearly collapsed because we failed to value one person's contributions. Now we're thriving because we've built systems that value everyone's contributions. Funny how that works, I agreed. There's been an informal inquiry, he continued carefully. From Horizon Technologies. They wanted to know if you'd be interested in discussing a CEO position there. I raised an eyebrow. Our former enemy wants to hire me? After we exposed their corporate espionage scheme, they cleaned house completely. New board. New leadership. They're trying to rebuild with integrity. He smiled. Apparently they've been studying our transformation and want someone who can replicate it. What did you tell them? That I'd pass along the message but suspected you weren't interested. He was right. I wasn't interested. Not because Horizon wasn't a good opportunity, but because my work at Crestwood wasn't finished. I'm staying, I confirmed. We've built something here that's too important to abandon. A culture where people are valued for their actual contributions, not just their visibility. Where the people doing essential invisible work are finally recognized. That's worth more than any title or compensation package. Ethan nodded, seemingly relieved. Good. Because I'm going to need your help with something. He pulled up a presentation on the conference room screen. Plans for an acquisition that would double Crestwood's size. This is ambitious, he said. And complicated. It will require integrating two completely different corporate cultures, technical systems, operational structures. The kind of complex transformation that most companies fail at. You want me to lead the integration, I said, already seeing the challenges and opportunities. I want you to rebuild them the way you rebuilt us, he clarified. Create something better than what either company was separately. And prove that what we've done here isn't a fluke. It's a replicable model for how companies should operate. I studied the plans, mind already racing through implementation strategies. This was exactly the kind of challenge I loved. Building systems that worked. Creating lasting value. Making the invisible visible. When do we start? I asked. He smiled. Tomorrow morning. If you're ready. I've been ready for years, I replied. People just didn't realize it. As I left the building that evening, I paused to look up at the Crestwood Solutions sign. 105 projects completed during my first tenure. Countless more since my return. But the most important project wasn't any specific system or implementation. It was proving that the people who do essential invisible work deserve recognition, respect, and authority to protect what they've built. 9 months ago, I'd walked out these doors in defeat, carrying my belongings in a cardboard box. Today I walked out as Chief Operating Officer, carrying plans to transform not just one company but two. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't what you destroy. It's what you build in the aftermath of betrayal. And what I'd built was a system, not just of technology but of values, that would outlast any individual contribution, including my own. That was the real victory. Not personal vindication but creating something that would protect others from experiencing what I'd endured. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed one final time. A message from an unknown number. Miss Chapman, you don't know me, but I work at one of your competitor companies. I heard about what you've done at Crestwood, how you've changed the culture to recognize essential contributions. Our company needs that transformation. Would you be willing to consult with us? I smiled, reading the message. The impact was spreading beyond Crestwood's walls. Other companies were noticing. Other professionals were recognizing that change was possible. I saved the contact information and made a mental note to respond tomorrow. Because this was bigger than Crestwood. Bigger than my personal story. This was about transforming how companies valued the people who built their foundations. And that work was just beginning.